Oh.
So, hi everybody. Thanks for being here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is April Rosario, and I am stepping in and helping Katie out for this month's Leader Lab. So, we are in the month of January, and we are looking ahead to February's packet. And I am going to share my screen to get us started because Katie has created a video for us to watch, and then we can kind of get into the rest of the Leader Lab and
Awesome.
questions.
And I'll say goodbye. I'm recording for those of you just watching this later. I'm the helper while Katie's gone. And I'll just say, April, if you need anything, text or call me if there's any tech issues that come up. Right. Have a great meeting, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so let me see if this will work, and it should. Can you all see Katie? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. I'm going to hit play, and the sound should be shared, but if it's not, just, flag me down, and I'll go back and try again.
Hi everybody, this is Katie Covey, and this is my overview for the February Widening the Circle theme, the February RE packet. So thanks to April for hosting the Leaders Lab this month, because I'm out of commission for a little while with some eye surgery, which will make it hard to focus. And April's running it, and I thought I would record this overview early so that I can give you my favorite things from the February packet. So the theme is widening the circle, and I want to point out that we've been working on this widening the circle program for Soul Matters. They've been doing small groups, and we had a research team way back in June. It's very exciting, and you can ask April, who's on this call for the live hosting, more about all the widening the circle stuff. So it's nice to have the theme for Wednesday, for February, be widening the circle. There are 4 lenses to the packet. Widening the way we accept ourselves, our insides and outsides. Widening the love we share, sort of Valentine's, since it's February. Celebrating all kinds of love, and particularly the way we can love and support refugees. Widening the history we tell, which is for Black History Month. And widening the principles we live by, a little dive into the 8th principle. So the first lesson, widening the way we accept ourselves, our insides and our outsides. I wanted to lift up that many of our elementary school children are involved with the social media culture now. My grandson was given an iPhone by his other grandparents, and when I go down to see him, it's scary the way he's getting sucked into this culture. And so, as a remedy, as an antidote, I'd like our faith communities to make an especial effort to say it's not these outside things that matter. They won't get you through hard times. The outside way your hair looks, how funny you can be. We enjoy TikTok. We enjoy Instagram. But when push comes to shove, it's going to be your insides. The things that they don't really talk about on social media. The things we care about, the people we love, what we believe in. So we're using The Hungry Coat, William Morris's story song for February. That's the Nasruddin story of going to a dinner with an old gardening coat on, and he's ignored, and then he shows up again with a fancy coat with pockets, and he realizes that it's his outsides that matter most, so he puts the food in the coat pockets, and people say, well, why are you doing that? He said, well, you wanted to see me in this fancy coat, so I'm feeding the coat because that's what made the difference, not what's inside of me. Also, one of the suggested explore it activities is homemade bagels. What's inside the hole, what's outside the hole. And this is from our own April Rosario. She's come up with a wonderful curriculum called the Uu Kids Recipe Book. And she's given us permission to publish that. And once again, you can ask her about that when I'm done with this little overview. The next session, the second session, scheduled to be close to Valentine's Day for February 2022. The love, widening the love we share, all kinds of love. The book is called The Silence Seekers. It's about a little boy who hears his mom say, these are asylum seekers, the refugees, and he thinks they are silence seekers. And so he goes to befriend this young teen and takes him to places that might be quiet, but in his urban environment there aren't many places. There's also some great UN videos on refugee children and their lives now that they have settled in, and I commend them to you. If you haven't dealt with the refugee situation as a congregation, these videos will be a very accessible way to see real children and what their life is like. The third lesson is the history we tell for Black History Month. So I have my phone here, and I want to share with you that when you can use your smartphone for all ages Wonderbox moment, I think Sophie Foz, the author of Today's Children and Yesterday's Heritage, she would be very proud of us because we're using smartphone technology. It's because one of the stories that we need to tell more of is Dr. Gladys Mae West, who is essentially known as the team lead of the group that invented GPS, which makes our Google phone app possible. So there it is in our hands. Thank you to this African American mathematician. Amazing. And something to know and be proud of. The second part of this lesson that I want to lift up to you is there's a wonderful book called The Book Itch. It's about the Harlem Renaissance and the world's largest African American bookstore that was there in the 30s through the 70s, I think it was. So at that same time period, so you can use the book called The Book Itch to talk about all these books that this father very proudly has collected and is part of the bookstore. Malcolm X visited it. All these famous people visited it. Here's the thing. Our first African American Unitarian minister also lived in Harlem and started a Unitarian church in Harlem during this same time period. And so I'm asking you to imagine, it's just imaginary, that some of the back figures in the Book Itch illustration might be people from his church, or maybe it's even Reverend Egbert Ethelred Brown himself, who was an intellectual, and we can imagine him visiting this wonderful bookstore. So there's a connection you could make for the children. Let them know it's imaginary, but it could be possible. Then the favorite poem, To Help Them Know by Heart, by Edwin Markham, one of our Universalist forebears. He drew a circle that shut me out, a heretic, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. And I've created hand motions in the preschool packet. You may wish to also use them with your elementary school children. He drew a circle that shut me out, so a little tiny circle. A heretic, a rebel, a thing to flout, throw it away. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and make a big circle that drew him in. The last lesson is on the 8th principle. And I'd like to lift up with gratitude Meg Mcguire, who made a stop motion animation explaining to the children in her congregation what the 8th principle was all about. And she's allowed us to share that. She's now a ministerial candidate for fellowship at Berkeley, California. And I contacted her, and she was very happy to know that we were going to be able to help others illustrate the 8th principle. So I played around a little bit with 8 and called it the Octo Principle. Octo means 8 in Latin, so you can do for Wonderbox, you can have an octopus. I didn't have an octopus, I'm sorry to show you. Or one of those little xylophones for children that have 8 notes. Octo is octave, the octave of music. Or an octogram, something that has 8 sides. So maybe we call it our Octo Principle. And then, fortunately, we are so lucky that the traditional game of hopscotch has 8 boxes in it. There's a video that describes how children draw the 8 boxes. And I could see putting a principle in each box and play hopscotch outside if February is an outside kind of month for you. Around here in Colorado, it can be Arctic and snowy, or it could be 50s and 60s, so you never know. The final thing I want to lift up about that principle, that lesson, is that sometimes people want to only use adult language of our principles for children, and sometimes you use the children's language. So I've included both types in each of the descriptions. And as well, we're lucky that Paula Cole-Jones and the DREs who were with her at a conference came up with children's language. And I have a link in there for children's language for the 8th principle as well. That seems to be becoming more and more generally accepted. So my wish for you is a wonderful February. Happy Valentine's Day. Sliding into crocuses if you're lucky, and just the beginnings of the spring season, depending on where you live. So enjoy your February and have a good month. And I will not be here next month either, but I will see you soon, and I look forward to it.
So I will unshare my screen. And that was Katie's kind of rundown of the packet. And Jenny and Sam can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the next part is just to kind of walk through how to implement things and questions and, you know, how to bring the packet to life in your congregation. That's right?
Yeah, she usually has us break it down where we share our challenges, then we share our opportunities, and then we come back around and share what's my word, Jenny? Takeaways. Okay. Takeaways from our time together.
Yeah. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to double check. Oops.
Yeah, it doesn't always necessarily focus exactly on the packet. Sometimes it's what's going on with whatever else you're doing with implementing soul matters in general in your congregation. So.
Well, then in that case, I will kind of turn it over to the two of you for some thoughts, questions, what you're excited about, what you're nervous about in terms of February and the things that Katie just kind of laid out for us.
I'll let you start off, Jenny.
Thank you. Well, I am excited because I just found out this morning that all things going well, our building will be ready for us to begin to start to use it again at the beginning of February. So we are going to slowly move into small groups coming in for hybrid worship, for multi-platform worship. And RE, and then our building rededication is planned for mid-March now, was originally at the end of January, which is supposed to be a large service. I don't know that we necessarily have all the particulars as to how we're going to get people there and how we're doing that. But anyways, so that gave me an opportunity to start thinking about RE again, because we've really come to kind of a full halt after the winter festival. And that's all right, because nobody's really been able to go out and do anything. And so I'm excited about that. I've spent the morning starting to think about family chapel and what that might look like, and problem solve, because I think since we'll have limited seating in the sanctuary, we're actually for the time being not going to start the kids in there, because if they start in there, then they leave, then there'll be lots of spaces that aren't able to be occupied if they're only in there for 15 minutes. So we're starting to think about, well, but maybe we'll do a family chapel at the same time. So how's that going to work? And in the other large room. So I'm just excited about that. Actually, I can't even, yeah.
That's super exciting.
Yeah, it is really super exciting. It's challenging, but yeah.
Once you're back meeting in person, will the majority of RE be inside, or will you be outside, or a little bit of both?
It's going to be, I mean, this is the plan for indoors, hopefully. I mean, I'm in Ohio, Northern Ohio. So it's like, 2 degrees out right now. So we're not averse to doing things outside. I honestly would have done some last Sunday, but we're not meeting in person at all, not even outside for these next couple of weeks. So yeah, we've got a large group room, classroom space, a large room that we're hoping to use. And we've got air filters or cleaners or whatever in there. So we'll see. But during those first few weeks when we're doing multi-platform worship with, like, the first week, it'll just be with the tech crew. And then the next week it'll be, we'll have the worship associates come and, that sort of thing. I think we're going to have RE because it's all the way down at the end of the building so that the kids can ease their way into the building without a lot of people. Because first of all, the building's not really recognizable as to one they used to ever be in before. Everything's been changed, everything. It was a full building renovation. And also they haven't been there in 2 years. I took some kids on a tour a couple months ago, but there were only about 5 of them. So that's exciting that we're going to get to start kind of easing into RE if people are willing to come. We'll see.
The only reason I asked is because a lot of the resources in the February packet work well, whether you're inside or outside. There's a lot of crafts. So there's some hauling of materials and supplies, but they can be done inside or outside. So I always love to see that.
Yeah. And we tend to, if we do outside, we tend to do it for shorter times or go hiking or do something else. So we'll see. I'm going to try and we'll see. And I'm going to do it in a 1-room classroom for the time being. And we'll make a plan that, we'll start together in family chapel and probably stay together, but if the groups get large enough, we'll have a plan to have enough adults that can basically do kind of the same activity, but break into other spaces, you know, so that more age appropriate spaces. And I know our youth ministry coordinator is gonna, when she hears this, because we just had staff and she wasn't there this morning, she's gonna go through the roof. She's so excited because nobody was showing up anymore for her. So even in person outside.
Nice.
So it's exciting. It's exciting.
Okay.
It's been a long time coming, Jenny.
Oh,
I feel like we've been talking about this for months.
this building, oh my God, yes, it was supposed to be done in September. And they started March 1st last year. And so now that's when the construction started, was March 1st of 2021. So, yeah.
That is definitely a long time coming. Well, I'm so excited for you.
Mm-hmm. And I can clean out my office at home.
There is something very liberating and freeing about being able to be like, I'm just going to go into the office and not have to work from home and be like, I will, you know, home can be home and sanctuary space, and then office can be, you know, it's nice to be able to go back and forth, but when you have to just be at home, that can be tricky. So
right, well, because I have, you know, we have everything in boxes right now, so my entire office is just there's a pile of Halloween, there's now the pile from solstice, there was the pile from summer, and there's just piles of supplies, and my office is like 8 by 10. You can't even walk in there anymore. There's the pile of books, because everything else is in storage. So.
Isn't that like the common DRE office?
Yeah, I didn't have an office before. I had a corner of the fellowship hall before my other place. So I only had an office in this building at this church, you know, well, for part of the, you know, when I started, but we weren't having RE in person. So it was nice and neat and clean when I moved in, pretty much stayed that way. So.
I think my office has, since I moved into this office, it's always been, you know, the pile of these books, but then there's the pile of these books, and then the box of these art supplies, and all of this owl stuff, and all of these donations. And I'm kind of excited at the moment that I have so much floor space after having my office reorganized and straightened up. It's really exciting, except I'm not in my office right now. But moving the home office out of my home.
Yeah, I'm 45 minutes from the church. So and my other congregation, I was 30 minutes, and I still work at home a lot. But yeah, like April said, the idea of not having to, you know, and even if we're not fully open, I can still go into my office. And I'm going to have a new office. The old youth room will become the RE office. So it's a pretty good sized room. The goal is to have all of the RE storage. It was scattered all over the building in every available space. So the goal is to have all of the storage. We're putting the old kitchen cupboards and cabinets on the outside, at least one of the outside walls. So I'll have counter space on a wall plus upper and lower cabinets. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I cleaned everything when we packed, you know, sorted and threw away. So now unpacking will be nice. That'll feel good to get a fresh start, you know, because otherwise I don't know when I would have ever gone through all that stuff. You know, you just start working and you deal with it the way it is, the way it was left for you. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
That's so exciting.
It's yay.
Yeah, there is that very, you're a DRE when, well, these are my everyday stickers, and these are my special occasion stickers. Oh, and those are my holiday stickers. But I need access to them at all times, because I may need to use a special occasion on a non-special occasion. Just stickers upon stickers upon stickers.
I know. And and we have a really nice RE library that's all in boxes right now. So it'll be nice to see what that looks like. And I mean, I don't even know everything that's there. We have a librarian, and I still, if I'm going to buy a book, I have to ask her, do we have that? Because it's in a card catalog right now, which I don't have access to. So we need to that's another exciting thing in the next year is we'll get our RE library digitized, and then people can borrow, you know. They can borrow now, but it's all in a card catalog, you know. Remember those card catalogs?
I do. Yeah.
There's not a lot of search criteria when you try and it's like, I need a story about card catalogs don't work that way.
How about you, Sam? What are you looking forward to or concerned about in the upcoming month?
I'm excited about the material that's coming up for February. I hadn't thought about, eighth principle and the, you know, the octagon and octopus. I'm like, oh, there's some really neat things you could spin off of that. So the wheels were turning on that, and I'm curious about the stop motion. I haven't watched that. So
we used it in worship a little while back.
I would love to be able to share that, because how do you explain this to the kids? I'm sure is, you know, that's out there, and really, how do you explain it to certain adults? So I think that'll be a useful tool to bring up. But my mind is very much on the concerns. We were having really good momentum at the end of 2021 with how we were slowly opening for meetings and small in-person worship, and the RE stuff that was happening that was really positive and people were excited. And, you know, COVID, it has blown up so much. I was on quarantine after being exposed. I'm negative, thank goodness, and was negative, but it's almost everyone that I'm talking to in and out of the congregation. They've been exposed, they're testing positive, they have a family member that's sick, they're locking down their families again. Just over the past couple of days, I've heard of 3 of the families in our program that are testing positive. And it's like, well, if there's those 3, who else is getting hit? And having to just completely shut down, and it feels like 2020 all over again. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to not go into that space of, great, now what do I do? I'm at a complete loss, because I know we have the tools, that we made it work. We found ways to be successful. Yeah, so there's concern for the families, there's concern for the members, and how do we pick up that momentum again? And we're hoping that February, maybe we can start opening back up to small groups again, but it's so hard to tell. Everything is day to day at this point. So I'm trying to hold on to some hope and glimmers of optimism, but I can say in this moment, I am really struggling with, okay, are back to square one, maybe square 2, and coming back from there.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Are you all meeting for RE in person or solely online right now?
We're completely back to online right now. Before the winter break, it was a mix. We had some things happening in person, some things that were completely virtual, some things that were multi-platform. And it was enough of a mix that there was something for just about everyone, where they could feel safe, they could feel comfortable, and it was great. And we've had to just remove any and all in-person gatherings that had been happening, which means we lose some of that engagement for those people who absolutely cannot do Zoom. And I think we can all relate to, there comes a moment where you just can't do it. You cannot look at another screen.
We haven't had any Zoom since last spring.
Yeah.
For RE, because the one things we have planned, nobody showed up for children and youth. And so we were outside in the summer, outside in the fall, and basically right up to mid-December, we were outside. We did our pageant outside, and wasn't really a pageant, but we did our solstice festival, our winter festival outside. And there was a really good, I don't know if you read the New York Times, but there's a parenting newsletter, a parenting piece in there that was just really talking about where parents are right now, and that they are feeling, and my kids are grown, but I like to read this portion of it just to stay in touch and see where people are coming from. And there was a really good bit about that even as we're starting as a society to talk about how what we're learning with Omicron is that how are we going to live with COVID and move out, that people with children under 5 are in a completely, they feel like they're completely isolated and in a different world than the one everybody else is occupying, because they can't start thinking about those things already. And employers are not as forgiving anymore. And when preschools and schools are shutting down due to lack of staffing, and it's really affecting, and employers are kind of like, yeah, we're kind of over this thing where you don't have childcare, so it's hard, and they're feeling very isolated, and I can see that. We have a pediatrician on our reopening committee, and one of his things that he raised up was, as we move back into our building, like I said, it's unrecognizable, but also that we're going to use what we call the everyday entrance, which is our new entrance, which is down near where the offices are, and it's at the far end of the RE wing. We're actually going to use that only for children and families to come in, so that they don't have to come into that overwhelming space right in the main area just outside the sanctuary, that they can kind of ease in coming down the hall towards it, and it might be a little less overwhelming for little people.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with some parents in my RE committee a couple of weeks ago, and we were saying how as difficult as the lockdown was, it was almost easier because everybody was on sort of the same playing field. And it's that exactly what you're talking about, where employers may not, I don't care that your kid was exposed and you have to stay home for a week with them because they're not old enough to stay home by themselves. Or we have we have a handful of newer babies that were born during COVID, and they are uncomfortable with looking at people's whole faces. Like, they're fine as long as you have a mask on. The minute you take that off and it's like, oh, a nose and a mouth and all of this, like, it's almost, that's the scary thing. And just because they're not used to seeing outside of their immediate family people's entire faces. And it's just everyone, I feel like we're trying to figure out how to live within COVID, but everyone is living on a different playing field depending on what your situation looks like. And I think that's really hard. And it's hard to juggle, and it's hard to balance, and the burnout is so real.
And yet we have to live with this.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting with that particular group, families with the youngest children, when it comes to for our congregation, our online presence, that's been our strongest presence, because that's where they have felt the safest. Is, man, our hardcore tried and true group since last March, or not last March, 2 Marches ago, is the younger ones who attend family chapel every Sunday. There have, I think, only been 1 or 2 Sundays where we had no kids show up, and that was like, Mother's Day weekend and first day of summer, everyone's getting out of the house because lockdown is over. But otherwise, like, that's been our tried and true group. Everyone else is burnt out, but the little ones, that's where they've been getting their engagement, and they are zoomed in for that every week.
Interesting.
Well, then I wonder, so one of the things that's in the packet is the homemade bagels. And I piloted that while we were still on Zoom. We hadn't come back to in-person yet. And it was the same thing. It was one of my bigger attended groups. And then I just opened it up to everybody. And so I had teenagers that were cooking on their own, and then little ones that were cooking with either older siblings or, parents or caregivers or things like that. But I would say if that is a group that you have that is, good and enjoys Zoom, that is a really good option from this packet. And it can be done, for the most part, we were able to do it because they only take about 20 minutes in the oven. So kiddos were leaving our hour space, bagel in hand, done. So that was fun. We got to see everyone's bagels. And, then they would be done, and then they could go and eat a snack. But yeah, a lot of these work really well for Zoom or in person. The other thing that a lot of them translate really well to just like asynchronous, like, here's this resource, do it with your family when it works for you, and then send us pictures of it, engagement that way. So then everyone's like looking at everyone's pictures type of thing. But yeah, I feel like it is almost harder as DREs and volunteers right now, because like everyone's on a different playing field with what's working for them, what's not working for them, where they feel comfortable, where they're burnt out. It's a challenge.
The weekly emails that I send out for Soulful Home, as well as the weekly blog that we send out to the families, those seem to be, I always have this like, is anyone even looking at it? Is anyone getting anything out of this? And then I get an email, just a random email going, wow, this has been great. Thank you so much for featuring this. Or those questions that you shared for table discussions were like so on point, and we had great discussion, and that was awesome. Thank you. So I think you're right, April, in that families do appreciate, like, okay, we're so overwhelmed with this, but we have these pieces that we can do when we have the moment. And we know we're not losing out on our church time, our spiritual time, that we're still finding some grounding in that. And speaking of bagels, I was going to ask you about the Uu Cookbook.
Yeah.
What is this?
So it is a curriculum that I and I use the word curriculum lightly because it can be used in so many different ways. I love to cook. And so when we went online, I was trying to figure out how to keep our kids engaged with Zoom. And so I started cooking and doing kitchen science experiments tied to the Soul Matters themes. And it was great. And it became one of my biggest attended groups. And I thought, this is working. And I know other DREs are struggling, and let me put it together and kind of package it up in a curriculum. And so I did that. And so it is Soul Matters themes from 2020. And there are 14, and I say recipes and not, because it's not all edible. So there's some things in there like unpoppable bubbles. So it's just recipes, some of it's kitchen, science experiments. And there are 14 of them, 14 themes and 22 recipes. And it works from preschoolers all the way up to high schoolers. And with each theme, there's a talk about it and a think about it section. So DREs could use it as a lesson plan. Like, here's the theme, we're going to revisit it, we're going to talk about it, here are some discussion questions, now we'll create the recipe together, and they all can be done within an hour. So you're either, ending it with something to eat and ready to go, or you've just done this, unpoppable bubbles, and then you're playing games with it. And you could tie a story to it, like if you wanted to extend it and make it like an hour and a half. So you could do it that way, and use it as a curriculum. Or you could, and it's for purchase. So dairies could purchase it and then copy it and hand it out to families who are looking for, again, ways to kind of engage with their faith or the spiritual themes, but, can't do it at, Zoom is set for 4:00 on a Wednesday. And so then they can kind of have it at home. The other thing that we did is it's written very simply. So it could also just be like a kid's cookbook that they have that they do on their own. I'm going to make my own snack today. Here's what I made, and then share it with families. But yeah, so that's what that is.
I like it. Thank you. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing.
And I had a ton of fun writing it. And I've gotten really, really good feedback from other DREs that have purchased it, that have really enjoyed using it and have used it in those multiple ways, like either as a full curriculum or just copied it and sent the PDF to, families in their congregation. But so far the feedback has been really good. So
that's great.
We had an event during the first year of the pandemic where we're still online, and it was a multi-gen event, and we didn't have a ton of children or teens attend. It was more on the adult side, but the kids and teens that did join in, when it came time to make and cook the tortillas, they were so into it.
Yeah.
They were so into it. Like, I'm looking over at the screen as I'm chatting with the author of the book that we were featuring, and they're grinding it and how they're getting into the dough. They were having, like, it was like, this is what I'm here for. This is what I needed. And I know that there was this conversation around the when you're on Zoom, it's auditory and maybe visual. And for those of us who need the hands-on, who need the interaction, who need more sensory, involved in what we're doing and learning and diving into, we need these things like making tortillas or making bagels and having these moments of Zoom scavenger hunt, run across your house and find something that ...
Yep.
We really need those. Otherwise, the kids and teens are like, no, thank you, I can't.
I think the things that are often most successful have been the things where we have had, like, we've done deliveries or asked them to bring something, even if it was just a cinnamon meditation or something, or things where there is a sensory element where everybody is having the same common experience at the same time. Those have been the most successful ones. There is one that somebody on the West Coast, what's his name? Sam Wilson shared one time, which was for older kids, but you could do it like with 4th and 5th and 6th graders, is my mini snack. So you got 5 minutes to run to the kitchen and make a tiny snack. And, they come back with tiny little sandwiches or, just little tiny things, and then share your tiny snack. And so everybody's run out of the room, done something, and come back. And
one of the things that I had done, and it's in there as a recommendation, is I always said to parents, don't pre-gather all the ingredients, because I would list each ingredient one at a time. Okay, now run and go get this. Now run and go get that. And it was this up, down, back and forth, which made it, and then we turn it into a game. Like, who can do it the fastest, or who can come back, holding the ingredient above your head in your left hand? Can you walk backwards to get it? Skip to go get the measuring bowl, all of those kind of things. And all of the recipes too, I try to make them, it's all common ingredients. So it's like things that, things that are easy to obtain or really inexpensive. So if you've got families that, we always said, if you you know, I would put together packets of ingredients, but so that it wasn't crushing my RE budget either. So that type of make it as accessible for everybody. But yeah, it was a lot of up, down, back and forth. You know, okay, now we're going to talk about it, but as we're talking, you've got to stir the dough, you know, clockwise 50 times and answer the discussion question type of thing. Because it's, I mean, I have a hard time just sitting on Zoom without something, you know, to color, write, doodle, you know, especially when they were still all online for school. Like it was, how do we make this as engaging as possible? And I think most of, aside from the bagel recipe, this whole packet, there's a lot of ways to add those sensory touches to each of the building blocks.
I was excited to see in this packet that she put in the poem for Stefani. It's one of my favorites of all time. And I used it in a Time for All Ages way last year. And, but I had worked that Lois Furibari, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but Lois Furibari is the words that come out of it. And I use it as a meditation. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I just sit there in my head saying, Lois Furibari, Lois Furibari. So I've shared that as a meditation because it's just, I just love it. But it also turned me on to that poet, which then took me down another path, which I just made me think of, which is a book of poetry called Woke. Have you seen it before, either of you? Write it down. It's really great. And I purchased it, but I have a feeling that I can't find it. So I think I must have purchased it for my old congregation. So now I need to buy it again for this congregation. But I don't know if that author is in that book or somehow I ended up getting to that point, but it has some really, really great poetry that you could use maybe with the older kids, but you can definitely with the older elementary, but definitely with your middle school and high school kids. It's really great stuff. I don't know if you see it on there, but I'll try and tell you the author's name in a second. It's Woke, A Young Poet's Call to Justice. And Elizabeth Acevedo, Mahogany Brown, and Olivia Gatwood are the poets. And the foreword is written by, he's a great children's author, Jason something. I like the foreword too. I've used the foreword actually. Anyways, he's famous. He might have just even won an award of some. Oh, Jason Reynolds wrote the foreword. Anyways.
Well, I know, so we've got a few minutes left. We've got like 6 minutes left, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I know Scott will be back in a minute to stop our recording. But one of the things that got brought up, and I know Katie mentioned it in her introduction, was the fact that she had put together this Widening the Circle research team. And then we were, doing small group meetings with other DREs. And one of the things that kept coming up in those groups that I guess I'll just highlight here is a concern about congregational pushback or a nervousness about widening the circle material. And are kids too young, or how do you do that sensitively? And so I'm wondering if that is a concern or a question for you guys, or, with the 8th principle. And that was the other thing I was going to say, and I don't remember the person's name, but someone has created this really awesome octopus coloring sheet for the 8th principle that got linked in the Soul Matters Facebook group. So if you go down that road of like, you know, octo means 8 and octopus, and so that's on the Soul Matters Facebook page with permission to use, which I know I intend to do because it's just a really fun way to introduce it.
Have either of you used the Octobot 8th Principle escape room that was created by Jen Blosser? You would need, it'd probably be your high school kids.
Yep.
But have you seen that, Sam?
No, I haven't.
It's
a virtual loop at the moment.
Yeah, it's a virtual escape room that explores the 8th principle and the kind of the reason behind it, with puzzles to solve, and it's not that hard to lead it once you get the hang of it. I led it with like some of the people in my Laredo chapter the first time, so we could all get the hang of it and went through it. But it's Jen Blosser, and I'm sure it's been posted in the 8th Principle group. It's been posted in the Religious Educators group. So Octobot, I think is what it's called.
Nice.
And I think that works well too in like a multi-generational group. Like you could do it
Yes.
with high schoolers and adults as
Yes.
well. If you're struggling with that critical mass, especially on Zoom, like, you know, it's tricky if you only have 2 or 3 folks show up. So I know a lot of folks have done that to open it up to high schoolers and adults to do together, which also adds, I think, a level of depth to the conversation when you have that multi-generational space.
I did it with the Racial Justice Task Force at one of my congregations so that they could then go, because you really only need about 8 people in the escape room, each one, so that then they could go out and lead smaller groups for the congregation as the leader of because you have to have someone to run the escape room. Sorry, I'd been thought of that earlier and I didn't mean to.
No, I think that's a great, I think it's great.
I love all of these different pieces have been coming out around the 8th principle on how to explore it, how to explain it, it's so easy for us to overthink on this, and I guess going back to I'm sorry, I'm so struggling with words today, but going back to the just like our various senses in explaining this and coming at it from different directions, I think I'm hoping will help to lessen the overthinking around the 8th principle. And I just I've seen some people or heard of some people in my own congregation that are like panicking about how do we get this message across so that everyone can just be on board. And it's like, okay, let's take the pressure off because we're doing the work, and we shouldn't have to put ourselves under so much pressure when we're coming to who we are at our core as a faith community. And we can have some fun with it, like escape rooms and the coloring sheets and whatnot, while also getting to the meat of it and understanding it. And yeah, I'm digging all of the stuff that's coming out.
I think it's such an important point. That was another thing that got kind of brought up in one of those small groups was folks thinking that there's only, one right way to do this work, or that it has to be serious, or that all widening the circle work has to be rooted in tragedy or pain. And that's a piece of it. And that is a part of the history. And it can still be really fun and really silly, and you can laugh, and there has to be a balance. Just like, it's work sometimes it's really hard to respect a certain view, and yet we do it and we work at it. and you can still have fun with it. And I think that that's such an important message to bring to this work and this theme of that it can be a balance, and it can be fun, and it can be silly, and you can laugh, and then you can have the really hard, serious conversations.
Don't forget the joy.
Yes.
There's joy in faith. There's work, but there's joy. Don't forget the joy. I never forget the joy. I always have the joy. Joy. I always have the joy.
That is such a perfect end note. Don't forget the joy. The end.
I love it, because that means you also see it like when you make your arms strong.
Every time I'm looking down, like, oh, joy. Okay, there's the joy. I got the joy.
That's way better than a Post-it note.
I got plenty of those too.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just hanging out. Tell me if you guys are still in the middle of the conversation, I can come back, or I can hang and listen in.
No, I think we're there. And I think Sam's ending was, I love the idea of ending on the don't forget the joy note.
Oh, that's great. All right, well, here, Sam, we can stay on for a second, but I'm gonna turn off the recording. So why don't you give us a don't forget the joy blessing while we record you and put you on the spot?
No pressure. Wasn't I just talking about taking off the pressure? In all the work we do, the highs and the lows, the solo work and the community work, holds with you at your core to never forget the joy.
Amen. That's awesome.
Amen.
All right, so stop.